What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Mr. Chocolate Reviews. And today we are headed back to one of Stephen King's most terrifying places, Derry. That is right, we're talking about Welcome to Derry, which just ended tonight on HBO Max. It's a series that dives into the origins of Pennywise the Dancing Clown and gets into some things of the book and even the movies talked about. Now, I was really excited for the show because, as you know, I'm a Stephen King fan, really loved Running Man this year, and my favorite book by him is The Long Walk, so I was eagerly ready to cover both of those. But whenever you mention Pennywise, that's when the world really listens. They didn't really care about those other two I just named off. And I feel like that's because it's his biggest story, because it has the most recognizable figure, Pennywise. And so with that, I was hyped. A lot of other people were hyped, so people have been enjoying this show. So let's see how I thought about it. So Welcome to Derry takes us way back before the Losers Club, before the events of It Chapter 1. And if you've read the book or even just watch Andy Muschietti's movies, you'll know that that is where the three major attacks are mentioned in Derry's history. So you got the 1960s killing, the 1930s gang massacre, and even the 1908 ironworks explosion. And so this show is taking each one of those eras and building a season around them. So season 1's focused on that first attack, season 2 being that gang attack, and then season 3 being that ironworks explosion. I think it's a really smart setup because it gives them room to really explore each generation of Derry, each version of evil, and how the town itself almost becomes a living thing. And I was actually a little initially on the fence when I first started this show because I was a little confused why you'd be going back in time, but they fully explained that. Now, let's talk about the cast because this lineup is stacked. You've got Taylour Paige, you got Chris Chalk, and of course Bill Skarsgård returning as Pennywise. Just hearing that Skarsgård was coming back had me and everyone else pretty much sold from day one. So the characters are the strongest part of this show, like any Stephen King adaptation, and I really feel like that's when his stories work the most because he's a really good character writer, which I know he really didn't have much to do with this because they really don't. Like for example, this season doesn't exist in the book, it doesn't exist in the show, they just mention this happening, right? And so I even think that characters like Leroy Hanlon, Will Hanlon's father, are really cool and really grounded in this show. You got a lot of storylines involving racism, small town fear, and paranoia, and I feel like it's layered. The show even touches on how the government becomes aware of Pennywise's existence and wants to use him as a weapon because, of course, they do. And imagine just thinking that you can control the thing that feeds fear. I mean, it is a lot of power to have. And then you've got Chris Chalk as Dick Halloran, my favorite character from the show, because big Shining fan, of course. I love this addition, seeing how his abilities and psychic connections start to develop during the series, because you got a subtle crossover feel that I feel like most Stephen King fans like myself are going to be eating up, right? We're waiting for him to go to that Overlook Hotel anytime during this season. And what really surprised me is how much this show balances the horror and the tragedy, because it's not just all jump scares, red balloons, whatever. Even episode 7 had so much trauma, had so much of that evil Derry in its roots from the inside. One of my favorite episodes, like I said, The Black Spot, really drove that home because it was a chilling story about a black-owned nightclub, or not nightclub, but it's like the military members get given this thing and like they basically kind of make like a juke joint, kind of like Sinners, that you recently just saw. And when Pennywise, enacts this stuff around Derry and all this evil stuff happening, you start realizing that he's not the biggest problem in Derry. And I want to talk about some of the negative things, unfortunately. I think it's episode 3 or 4, when the show dipped in quality. You all know what I'm talking about. That CGI mess where they were, bicycling and you have the little stuff flying around. I don't know what that was supposed to be. Whatever it was, it looked awful. But even then, I think even though you were cutting corners, because clearly the finales look crazy, the beginning episodes, they wanted to look crazy, they wanted to really pop. I feel like you could have made some practical effects, whatever, but I feel like you cut corners just being like, hey, it just looks like ass, whatever. But let's get back on track. So, Bill Skarsgård, I don't think that he shows up as Pennywise like episode, 5, I think? I could be wrong about that, but I think it's like 4 or 5 or something like that. But even with that, he's showing up as different entities. His presence is everywhere. You feel him in the shadows and the whispers. And when he fully does show up as the clown, full Pennywise mode starts to hit really hard, because Skarsgård reminds you why he's one of the best horror, our modern horror performers out there. He just really gets it, from Nosferatu to even now Pennywise. The movement, the voice, he just clicks right back in there. And Skarsgård reminds you why he's one of the best modern horror performers out there. I feel like he just really gets it. Like, even like the movement, everybody's been doing a little Pennywise dance and stuff. I feel like he's terrifying and tragic at the same time. I'd honestly say that this cements his portrayal as one of the all-time great horror performances. I'd put him up there with Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, Doug Bradley as Pinhead, the legends. And I feel like that's not a knock to them either. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, they're great. I feel like they're both great. Like, this man, I don't see anybody else as Pennywise. Now, I know that's not knocking the OG, but it's just something about Bill Skarsgård's portrayal that's really dark, emotional, and really character-driven that I just really love about this performance. I feel like this show expands the lore of Pennywise and Derry in a way that feels fresh, but still connected to what came before, because you don't need to have read the book or even watched the movies to really enjoy this. But if you have, it definitely adds some layers, especially towards the finale. But with that, I think the show has a few hiccups, like I mentioned overall, a few pacing issues in those hiccups, but overall, every episode kept me hooked, and I think the writing is very sharp when it needed to be. And so, yeah, with that, Welcome to Derry for me is an easy 9 out of 10 for me, especially on a TV show scale, which I rate a little bit differently, as you can tell. I think it's one of those best shows that, especially on the horror scale too. I can't think of many horror shows, I guess, like From right now that's currently coming on, but that's like actually horror, like actually scary. And so I'm excited for the Ironworks explosion, from the gang massacre, all this other stuff we're going to get from these next 2 seasons. And Bill Skarsgård proves once again why he is Pennywise. So what did you guys think about Welcome to Derry Season 1? Did it live up to the hype for you? Drop your thoughts below down in the comments. And as always, do not forget to like, subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the next one.